Hi everyone, welcome back to Great Glen Yoga. My name's Rachel and it's lovely to welcome you here today for a Yin Yoga practice that's going to be looking at our hips. So the hip area is obviously really important within the body. It's important for pretty much everything that we do, our mobility, how we sit, how we walk, all of those things. So there's quite a lot of tension that can build up, quite a lot of wear and tear. So really this practice is about giving it a little bit of time and attention, helping us to soothe into the hip flexors, the connective tissue in and around the hip area, and just also enjoy some poses that will be really relaxing and enjoyable anyway. So I'm not going to specifically say that you need any props for this particular practice, although as always, it's useful to have a few handy. Possibly towards the end, if you've got a bolster or a couple of blocks, we might use those for one of the final poses. But honestly, if you don't have it, it's not the end of the world at all. We can make do. And obviously, if you've got any sofa cushions or anything like that, we can use those instead. So we're going to make a start in hopefully a really lovely way, which is to come into a wide-legged child's pose. So the thing with hips and hip mobility and hip flexibility is that this will be entirely dependent on your anatomy. You might have quite tight hip area. You might find that that's where you hold quite a lot of tension. So you may not find that the flexibility is there in the hips as much as you'd like it to be. But also by doing Yin Yoga practices like this, we are going to be increasing and improving flexibility all the time. So just be patient with where you are now. Don't push any of the poses too far. And over time, particularly if you repeat this practice a few times, you will start to notice the difference. You'll start to feel that kind of melting and relaxation in the hips the more you try it. So with this first pose, there's a few different approaches we can take, and although I'm calling this a wide-legged child's pose, it doesn't have to be particularly wide-legged. All we're doing is we're coming just to sit on our heels to begin with, and then if everyone can take the tips of the big toes together, and what that will do inevitably is just start to move the knees apart from each other to allow the two big toes to touch. And you can come just a little way apart, just like this. You might just have them pretty much hip distance apart from each other, or if you'd like, you can come out a little bit further, maybe just to the edges of the mat. And that'll just start to expand the area around the hips, start to give us a little bit more space to work with in this child's pose. So once you've found the kind of area of where the hips sit that feels good for you, we can start to move forward. So really gently, just starting to walk the hands forward in front of us, coming down all the time until even we can get down to our forearms. And if we can, keeping the bum kind of firmly down onto the heels as we come down, but you might find you've got a bit more of a gap there. Over time that will change and you'll find the bum comes more down towards the feet. And then we're just going to rest the forehead onto the ground, arms in front of us, just melting into the floor. If you need to kind of double your mat over so that the area under the forehead is a little more comfortable, or you want to put a small pillow there, anything like that is fine. Just make this pose work for you, make it comfortable for you. And then we're just going to take really slow, deep breaths. Just ground ourselves into this pose. And you'll just hopefully feel some very light sensation in the hip area here. This is a really nice place to start in a practice where we're targeting the hips. Some of the other poses we go on to might be a little more intense, but this should hopefully just relax us into the practice. And just relaxing the arms as well. We're not trying to pull ourselves forward or anything here. It's just a really light touch, just to stabilize the upper body. ease ourselves out of the pose, just starting to lift the head, easing the hands back towards the body, coming up nice and slowly. And we'll just take the legs out in front of us, sitting back on the hands and just feeling the effects of that first pose. Just give your legs a little shake. We're going to come into a seated pigeon pose now. So for this first side, I'm going to do it sort of turned on to the camera so that you can see what I'm doing. So legs can come straight out in front of you to begin with, and we're going to start off with the left leg. So we're going to take the left leg and put the left foot just sitting on top of the right leg. And this might feel enough for you. That sort of action of propping the foot up might just begin to bring in enough sensation into the hip. Maybe if you've got any knee problems as well, this would be as far as I would go with this. Just kind of go with your own body and see how you feel. If it feels as though you could handle a little bit more sensation, we're going to just lean back on the hands, plant the right foot and start to bring the right foot closer in to the body. And you might just have to sort of wiggle around a bit just to get the right kind of area in this for you. We're not going to be here for too long, but it'll just give a really nice sensation in that left hip area. And what I quite like to do, and you'll notice this in quite a lot of my videos when I'm in either a seated or a reclined pigeon pose, just that little bit of rocking right at the start, just massaging that hip can feel really nice. And you can be anywhere with the right foot. You can be sort of slightly up, just be ever so slightly up, or you can be a little further towards the body like I am. And just relax. Try to keep the shoulders down and away from the ears if you can. And either you can be in stillness or just enjoying this slight rocking motion. All the time, keeping an eye on our breathing. The great thing with Yin Yoga is there's always a little bit of an indication through the breathing if something is starting to become a little bit too intense. You might just find that the breathing becomes a bit more difficult, so keep an eye on that. Should be taking nice big belly breaths. And to come out of this pose, we're just going to reverse how we got into it. So we're just going to let the right leg come forward, release the left. And again, we'll just take a moment here, just with the legs out in front of us. Just responding to that pose. And before we come on to the second side, we're going to come into frog pose. So lean over onto one side and come back up to your knees. And again, I'll do this facing on camera so that you can see where I'm going with everything. So frog pose can be quite intense. So this is one where I would definitely suggest just go with whatever your body feels and needs. If at any point you find, oof, that's a little bit pinchy or a little bit uncomfortable, come out of it or adjust slightly to bring yourself to a different level of the pose. So we're going to do pretty much exactly what we did in the first pose with wide-legged child's pose. We're going to bring the knees out. We can keep the big toes together to begin with. Just find a position with your knees that feels comfortable. Again, you might want to look at doubling up the mat, or if you've got any kind of little padded yoga jellies, you could put those under the knees as well. And then instead of having the toes meeting in the middle, we're going to just start to turn the feet out. So looking like a little frog. So just find a position that feels good. You'll start to feel this in the inner thighs as well as around the hip area. And if it feels best for you to stay upright, then this is where you'll stay. and just enjoy that sensation in the legs. And as I say, if it becomes a bit too much at any time, you could come back into a child's pose or just bring the knees in a little bit from where they currently are. If it's in your practice to come down on the forearms, then that would be a really nice place to come. It just increases a little bit more intensity, particularly around the hip area. And if you really feel you need a little bit extra, you can come right the way down onto the torso, maybe rest the chin on the hands. And again, that just will increase that stretch in the hips and the inner thighs. But I think I'll come on to the forearms today. That feels good. And also one of the other things that you could do is you could use your props here as well. So you could always have a bolster under the torso. You could have a block for the forehead. Just play around with it and find what works for you. And just sinking into this sensation, enjoying that feeling in the hips and the thighs. And just keeping the knee and the ankle in line with each other. That'll just protect those joints. Coming out of frog pose, we're just going to raise back up onto the hands if you were down on the forearms, and just flip the feet back towards center and taking the hips and the bum back onto the heels, and then we can just bring the knees in together. Just spending a second here, just on the knees, just recovering and rebounding from that pose. It can be an intense one, so look after yourself, take your time. And we'll come on to our seated pigeon pose on the other side. So I'll sit this way on this time so you can see what the shape looks like from a different angle. So this time we're going to be taking the right foot over onto the left leg. So just lift that over, and again, see how that feels. Give yourself a second to just settle into that pose. And you might find that that sensation around the hip area on the right leg is enough. And if that's the case, we can just settle back onto the hands and stay here. If it feels like you want a little bit more, we're taking the left foot down onto the mat and coming up with that left foot as far as we want. So you might come up a little bit further, using the hands to just keep the torso nice and high. Or you might be a little bit further down, but again, just feeling that slight increase in sensation on the side of the hip, which can feel really nice. So choose how far you want to go with this today. Just relaxing the right foot. Using the hands, as I say, to just keep that torso lifted. Shoulders away from the ears if you can. And again, just that rock might feel quite nice. Just to begin with. And that rock can feel really nice as well after a intense pose like frog pose, just massaging our hip crease there. And as before, let's just gently come out by taking the left leg back out in front of us, releasing the right, and then just letting the two legs fall away from each other, just relaxing here for a moment. We'll come now into a forward fold. So we're going to come into a butterfly fold here, which is probably one of the most popular and most well-known of the Yin Yoga poses, which are targeting the hip area particularly, although butterfly will also kind of give us quite a lot for the back, for the thighs, for other parts of the body as well. So bringing the soles of the feet together. And again, this is an opportunity to play around with angles and how far away the feet are from the body. What you will usually find is if you bring the feet in quite close to the body, the intensity will increase more around the inner thighs. That's where you'll usually feel that sensation the most, although you'll definitely still feel it into the hips and also into the knees as well. If you take the feet a little bit further out in front of you, the sensation tends to be more around the outer part of the leg and in particular around the hip area. So I think that's where I'm going to go today. So find a kind of place that feels comfortable for you. And then because we're in Yin Yoga, we're not using the feet to kind of pull ourselves forward. We don't need to have that flat back. We can round forward, just draping over the legs and relaxing. Just find again a spot that feels good for you. Coming forward as far as you feel able to and that feels right for you today. And that'll feel different on different days. And I think one of the most important things about Yin Yoga is, none of this is about competing with other people or even competing with yourself. It's understanding that the body every day will feel different depending on so many different factors. So it's just about reminding yourself that I'm going to get out of this what I need for today. And even if that is different to yesterday or tomorrow, it's right for me today. And just lifting the head, easing ourselves back up to a seated position nice and slowly. Bringing the legs back up, just having the knees bent, feet out in front of you, and you can just clasp the arms around the knees, bending the head. Let's just take a second here before we move on. Just feeling the effects of your practice so far. Bringing the head back up, We're going to come now into a reclined deer pose. So this is probably the only pose where I would suggest it might be useful to have a prop. So in this case, I'm going to use my yoga bolster, but if you've got kind of big couch cushions like this, that could work. You could also use your blocks as well, one under the upper back, one under the back of the head. But I'll use this bolster and we'll see how we get on. So what we're going to be doing is a reclined deer pose. So we're going to take our left foot, left leg, and have that parallel with the short edge of the mat. And we're going to take the right leg and have that parallel with the long edge of the mat. Ankle and knee linking together and in line on each leg and foot. And then you're probably going to come at a slight diagonal with your prop behind you. So just bring the prop in towards the base of the back if you're using a big pillow or a cushion or a yoga bolster like me. And then we're just going to start to ease ourselves down. Now, you don't have to use a prop for this, because actually you may find that just coming down to about here and resting on the hands feels like enough of a stretch. We're doing a really quite intense internal rotation of the hip on the right side. So you will feel that. It's a kind of action that we don't do a lot of. So you will kind of notice it. I think external rotation, we're used to that quite a lot. We're used to it in yoga, we're used to it in our day-to-day lives, but the internal rotation feels a little bit different. So if it feels like this is far enough, this is as far as you go. This is ideal. If you want to come down a little bit further, you've got your prop or you've got your cushion, you can just start to lay back down. So the most important leg that we're focusing on in this pose is the right leg. The left leg, it's still good to have that kind of the integrity of that as much as you can as we set it up. But if that looks a little different to mine, it's not a problem. The main thing we're working on is this internal rotation in the right hip. So just find a spot that feels good for you. Rest back either on your hands or on a pillow or bolster, and we'll just relax here. And see how this feels. If you're new to deer pose, it might feel quite unusual to begin with. And if you do need to come out a little bit earlier of the pose, then please do so. We're just going to take our last couple of breaths in this pose. We won't stay in this one for too long. If you were down on your bolster or a pillow, just pop the palms back on the floor and just starting to lift up nice and gently. And then we can move the legs back in front of us. And again, just take that couple of seconds, just stretching the legs out in front of us. And just do any little movements that you need. And we'll come on to the other side. So I'm going to spin round and take my bolster over to the opposite side. So in this situation, we're taking the right leg, and again, we're going to have that parallel to the front edge of the mat, heel, ankle and knee in line, and then bringing the left leg out next to the long edge of the mat, and again, knee, ankle in line wherever possible. Bringing the bolster behind, just checking you've got the space you need. And just, yeah, find a place that works well. And then again, you may just be coming down onto the hands. If that feels really good, if that feels lovely on that left hip, then stay there and enjoy that pose. And if you want to come down a little bit further, have the bolster or the cushion behind you, just lying, melting down onto the bolster and enjoying the sensation, the greater sensation that that gives to the left hip area. Just melting into it. You might notice a difference as well in how each hip feels with this internal rotation. I know I always feel it far, far more on my right hip than my left, so it will feel quite different sometimes. So we'll take our last couple of breaths on this side. Easing ourselves back up nice and gently. Bringing the feet back out in front. You can pop your bolster off to the side. And then we're going to come down onto our backs. So just easing the length of the spine down onto the mat. And let's bring the knees in towards the chest, clasping the hands around the knees, the legs, and just gently rocking from side to side. Just feeling the impact of those poses on the hips, massaging the spine against the floor. And we'll come into Shavasana. So just releasing the legs down to the mat, arms come by our sides, palms facing up, feet can fall away from each other. There's nothing more to do. We're just going to relax here. Just enjoying the soothing nature of this practice, reflecting on how the hip area feels now compared to when we started the practice. Enjoying all of the sensations that that's thrown up. Thank you so much for joining me today for this Yin Yoga practice, looking at our hips. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've got something from it. And I hope to see you back here on the mat again soon. Thank you very much.